There was a question in the comments on a video a while back about bullpen management and how I structure it, as well as how I keep fresh arms throughout the season. So, this is just a few quick, simple things I do to try to manage the bullpen throughout the season. And this is a traditional league picking up with regular MLB rules as of this season. Well, pre-coronavirus rules. So that's a 26-man roster, three batter minimum. I play with all that. And so what I do is I have, and this is my current Orioles sim. I'm in the off season, but I just kind of set it up how I normally set up my pitching staff. I have five starters and I have eight guys in the bullpen for 13 pitchers. And here you have the roles for the pitchers, and I generally use these primary traditional roles when I'm the general manager and I'm not managing the game. When I do manage games and I'm making substitutions, which I don't do in this sim and I don't normally do, I manage the bullpen much differently, kind of more the way that modern managers, or whatever the right phrase for it is, where they generally try to have their best pitchers get the most important outs. So you might kind of have a closer, but really you want to use your best reliever in the highest leverage situation in like the seventh inning when the game is on the line. So I manage that way when I'm the manager, but here I'm kind of talking about more how I do it as the general manager, which was much more in traditional baseball bullpen roles. And the reasons I do that are, I mean, one is not the best reason. It's just when I started playing the game many years ago, that's kind of how bullpens were being run, and I've stuck with that because it worked. And I've just never messed around with the game enough to see if I were to say, put the primary roles to none specified for a bunch of guys, and then have secondary role be like high leverage, stopper, and maybe even openers or foulers. So if you have managed bullpens in a non-traditional way as a general manager, I'd be interested to know how that worked, because I just have not done that. So as you can see, pretty traditional here. I have a closer, I have two setup guys, I have three middle relievers, a long reliever, and a lefty specialist. And there are exceptions to this, but this is normally how I try to set up my bullpen. And with the lefty specialist, I try to have at least one more lefty in the bullpen, and generally like that guy in a setup role, sometimes a middle reliever role. If it's a closer, that's fine too, but I like to have at least a specialist and at least one other lefty in my bullpen. And I do use the specialist even with the three batter minimum rule, and I've still found it pretty effective. And as you can see over here, I do use some secondary roles. So my best setup guy, Feltman, I use him in high leverage roles as well. So my manager in the games will be more likely to bring him in before this setup eighth inning or later usage option. I've seen him brought in, in the sixth inning in a really crucial situation to the game, and I like that because I like having my best guy in that instead of just having a middle or long reliever in because it's earlier in the game. And to try to not have my bullpen run out of guys at the back end, or I guess to try to make an order to it, I should say, I then make a middle reliever secondary role setup. So that way if Feltman comes in early in the game and then Smith comes in at some point and we're not to my closer yet, I still have a say in who my manager is most likely to use next. And so I pick my best middle reliever and give him secondary as a setup role. With a long reliever, I generally make the secondary role emergency starting pitcher. So if I have an injury or for some reason a guy's not able to start, short rest because of a doubleheader, etc., he'll be the most likely guy to use. And then specialists don't get used as often as the rest of the team normally, or the rest of the bullpen. So I'll give them a secondary role of middle relief normally to get them a bit more work. And another thing I'll do with the middle relievers is oftentimes I'll do a use more often for my best guy, and if there's a guy who's slumping or a guy who's clearly the weak link, I will do use less often or avoid high leverage. If you want a guy not coming in when the game's when there's big moments in the game, you can do avoid high leverage. I'll do that as well with weak links or guys that are slumping, etc. And so the other thing that I do to try to keep fresh arms in the bullpen is at least one middle reliever I want to have minor league options, which means I can send that guy up and down from the majors to the minors without him having to clear waivers. If you need more clarification on how option years works, I did a video on roster rules, and that explains it there. So like if you go into JD Hammer here and go to his contract, he's got 2 option years. So the reason that that's helpful is because it allows you to bring in a fresh arm or two. sometimes your bullpen will get tired and you won't have enough guys available for the next day's game. So at that point, you can option a guy like JD Hammer and bring up a pitcher who's in AAA but on your 40-man roster and is rested, so it gives you a fresh arm. Same thing with the long reliever. Once a guy who's in my long relief role is out of minor league options, if he's not ready to step into my rotation at that point, I get rid of him. I want a long reliever who has minor league options so he can go up and down throughout the season, because they'll come in and sometimes they'll pitch 3-4 innings and they'll be unavailable for several days, which is fine. Sometimes you can survive that, but if the rest of your bullpen is gassed too, that's going to be an issue. So I like to have a fresh long reliever, especially when the rest of my bullpen is tired. So that's basically what I do. That's how I structure it. Pretty traditional roles. I'd be interested if anybody simply in GM mode without managing is using the non-traditional roles, and keep it fresh. Just make sure you have a couple guys you can option in the minor leagues when you need fresh arms. Oh, and one other thing you can do with your closer, if you want them coming in a little earlier, you can make them a stopper, which Out of the Park Manual, it explains all these roles I'm going over if I've skimmed over too much. But a stopper it basically means that the Out of the Park manager considers him a closer, but will be willing to bring him in a bit earlier than just the traditional ninth inning role. So that's what I do. Any questions or any videos on other topics that would be helpful, just leave it in the comments.